and I'm a nurse educator here at UbiSim. I help develop new nursing scenarios for our virtual reality simulation platform. Outside of UbiSim, I have a background similar to a lot of you joining us today. I taught nursing students for 37 years, and I've spent 18 years as a simulationist and simulation coordinator educator. I'm thrilled to see so many of you joining us today. Okay, now let's get the chat conversation going. Some of you have already started. So in the chat tab, please type in where you're joining from. So in my case, I am joining from Erie, Pennsylvania. So go ahead, click into that chat and tell us where you are today. And a special welcome if you are joining from outside of the United States. We're happy to have you here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for getting this chat started. Feel free to keep it up as we go along, and remember to post any questions that you have into the Q&A tab, and we will answer them as soon as we can. Oh, somebody's on vacation from the Bahamas. Wow.
Jealous of that.
I tell ya. Well, it is exciting to have you join us today. So before we get underway, I also want to take a moment to introduce you to UbiSim, since this may be the first time some of you have joined us for a webinar. We like to say that UbiSim is where nursing practice gets real. Our immersive virtual reality simulation platform for nursing education is the world's first designed by nurses for nurses. UbiSim's intuitive and customizable experience empowers learners to safely develop clinical judgment skills, confidence, and a heart for patient-centric care. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, we have a brand new 30-second video that describes who we are and what we do. And I'd like to play it for you now. All right, hope you enjoyed that little video clip as UbiSim empowers knowledge. All right, and now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Dan Weberg, today's guest speaker. Many of us already know Dr. Nurse Dan from following him on social media, but I'd like to share a bit more about his background. Dan Weberg is a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing and expert in nursing, healthcare innovation, and complex systems leadership. He currently supports Kaiser Permanente as the Executive Director of Nursing Workforce Development and Innovation, building nursing workforce planning, a system-level new grad residency program, and other system-level nursing workforce initiatives. Previously at Kaiser Permanente, Dan held roles in nursing innovation, research, and technology strategy across 8 regions, 38 hospitals, and 70,000 nurses. He is currently on the faculty at the Ohio State University College of Nursing and also serves as Vice President of the American Nurses Association of California. We are thrilled to have Dan speaking with us today. So welcome to the webinar, Dan.
Thanks, Debbie. Really appreciate it, and excited to be here with UbiSim. That video is pretty cool. It's reminding me of when I used the UbiSim platform as we were starting to work together. So, just an awesome way to get students and nurses prepared. So I'm excited to chat today. We're going to talk about closing the transition to practice gap, VR, technology-enabled education, but we're going to go broader than that as well. My role right now at Kaiser Permanente, I lead our nursing new grad residency program and our experienced nurse fellowship programs. And we have a gap. I'm sure many of you are aware. We have a 12-month gap between when a nurse graduates nursing school and when they can become productive and safe as independent practitioners. And that gap is too big. And I think we need to continue to challenge our nursing education institutions and ourselves to adopt technology in order to better prepare our nurses graduating from nursing school. And the analogy I give sometimes is, if you bought an iPhone and you couldn't turn it on for 12 months, you'd stop buying the iPhone and you'd switch. But yet we still have new grads that take 12 months to get up to speed and through transition to practice programs. And so if we decrease that amount of time by just a month, a few weeks, that saves significant amount of dollars from a healthcare system perspective, but it also gets our nurses to the bedside faster so that they can help an understaffed unit. They can begin their careers and they can be safe practitioners delivering the care we want them to be. So my challenge to all of you is to think about how could we redesign nursing education in order to prepare our nurses better so that that gap is 3 months, not 12. And I know that's a big challenge, but with big challenges comes innovation, and that's my wheelhouse. So let's dive in. We'll have some fun pictures in here too, and so when you see an AI generated picture like the one up here, I want you to look at it and think about what's wrong with the picture and what the prompt might be. So for this one, if you want to start off in the chat, because I can see the chat, what do you think the prompt I used to create this AI generated picture was? If you had to guess, would love to see any ideas there. I'll give you all a second to type in if you'd like. Yes, Sarah Brown coming out of the gate, winning you already won. Yeah, it looks like an old Blockbuster, right? So AI nailed it. So my prompt here was put nurses, make a picture with nurses working at Blockbuster Video. And yeah, actually used Dolly 3 for this one. But the reason I say that is because this is our Blockbuster moment. This is the time where we can double down on the past and do the same old thing that we've been doing, or it's our chance to build the future. And we all know what Netflix did and where Netflix is now. There's one left in Bend, Oregon, and it's also an Airbnb. What we don't want nursing to go that route. We want nursing to go and build its future, change itself, challenge its assumptions, and move forward. So we're going to do about 20 minutes here of some content, and then we're going to jump into questions. If you have questions, there's a Q&A function. There's the messages and the chat function. Please put them in there, and we will make sure that this all works. All right, so let's move on. What are the paradigm shifting moments that are hitting healthcare at this time that's requiring us to think and challenge ourselves to do things differently? There's a principle within design thinking, which is an innovation tool set called design principles. And that's where you take a really complex topic and you try and distill it down into sort of North Stars. In the military, they call this commander's intent. There's a great book called Made to Stick by Dan and Heath, where they go into a lot of detail around this. But these are sort of the design principles or the North Stars that healthcare is moving to. And I want you to think about how you're preparing your students and your graduates to meet a healthcare system in which this is the direction. One, everyday life is the new context of care, not the 1% of time that people go in and out of a clinic or a hospital bed, but really every choice they make in their life can be influenced towards better health. The next one is integrated care teams are linked to people, not places. And we're seeing that with the rise of telehealth, with virtual care, with remote monitoring. It's not really you linking to a clinic every day to get your blood pressure checked. You can do that anywhere. And now you can do it with things the size of wedding rings. And so how do we teach our students to link to the people, not necessarily the place of where care is delivered? And then the last one is personalized health experiences are enabled with technology. And we know that that's true with the ability to do monitoring with, with smartwatches, with your phone, track your steps, your food, the Oura Ring. All these things are coming out that you can get hundreds and thousands of data points about yourself, and that will help us continue to focus in to personalized health experiences instead of the generic ones that we have been accustomed to. So what else is driving this change? Consumers in every other aspect of their business or aspect of their lives have instant access to things. You go on Amazon, you can get something delivered in 2 days, sometimes within 2 hours. You can personalize your finances, your shopping, your hotel bookings. All of those things are app enabled, instantly able to be purchased and delivered to you in near real time. And then we go to healthcare, and healthcare is still a huge legacy experience in which you have to make phone calls. I think healthcare is the last industry in which we still use pagers. We still print out things in triplicate and fax things. Like no other industry is doing that. And so consumers are really demanding a different experience from healthcare because it doesn't meet their needs the way the rest of their lives and industries are doing. The next piece is nurses' needs are changing as well. Nurses are having to become much more specialized. Their entire care delivery is enabled with different technology now, and we're not necessarily preparing them in nursing school for that technology-enabled future. Every single piece of a nurse's workflow now has a technological component to it, whether that's electronic charting or wearable technology or new ORs or virtual, robots coming in to deliver different things. There's so much change in technology, yet we're still sort of missed the boat on how do we prepare them for that technology-enabled future. So with all of these pressures, healthcare is really in this shift between a volume-based approach, so how many widgets can we work through in a given day, to a continuous relationship or value-based approach. And this has been going on for a long time, but we're continuing to move more towards the value-based approach on the right. And in that, you can see the different approaches that we need to prepare our clinicians for. One, a continuous relationship in care, one that is bridged by in-person visits, by the secure messaging, remote monitoring, and other technology that can support care delivery. Clinical teams are in charge, not just a physician or advanced practice provider. The entire team is needed in order to manage the care of patients. It's evidence-based, which I know nursing has been a huge proponent of. The patient is actually in control of many of their choices. They have access to information now that they didn't before. They are researching their disease states and their health issues more thoroughly and easily with AI, and so they're coming prepared to visits that they weren't necessarily in the past. We have a lot more information. The responsibility of the system is now safety. It's not the clinicians, but the entire system has to be set up to create safety. And we're trying to reduce waste in the system as well, trying to become more and more efficient as we continue the value equation. So you can look at the difference between these two approaches, and we still kind of training our students in the old approach. Touch the patient, do the visit. Be in a specific location to do these things. And while that won't change, we're still going to, have in-person care. We need to prepare them for the virtual components that augment that in-person care as well. So our workforce is ultimately changing, and that's what we have to sort of think about and challenge our assumptions with. So here's 4 different aspects that are shifting. These are provocations. My job is the Chief Provocation Officer, and so I'm going to do some provocation here. The workforce is changing. You will never, ever, ever be fully staffed ever again on a unit the way you were in the past. And that is sort of depressing, but at the same time, I think it's a chance for us to think about care teams differently. We'll have a core of in-person, care teams delivering on the front lines, and they're going to be augmented by virtual care. They're going to be augmented by AI-enabled risk scores and virtual sitters and all of this other stuff as well. So having enough people physically on the unit likely isn't going to happen, but you will have all these augmented pieces behind you supporting the clinicians delivering the care. I think we're starting to start moving into skill determining assignments as well. The fact that we continue to, you're hired into 4 North ICU and that's where you work for the rest of your life isn't necessarily the best way to staff anymore. And so looking and understanding nurses' competencies, their career goals, their skills, and assigning them to patients in the hospital or in the clinic based on that, rather than the physical unit that they got hired into, is starting to happen, where we can match skill to patient need in real time. That's going to be a workforce where we've optimized the power of our nursing colleagues. We have an on-demand workforce as well. So we have more and more people coming in wanting to do per diem roles or a couple hour shifts. And now we have technology that's allowing us to be able to do that. But we still sort of train people to work those 12 hours. And so how would we shift things to be different if you knew you only worked 4-hour shifts and you were going to move around or float or do these other things? And by the way, I completely understand that floating is the F word in nursing. But that is the future, where we move people around in the dynamic world of patient care. And then the last one is data-driven decision-making. We have so much ability to catalog competency data, patient care needs, social determinants of health, all of these things. That's what's really going to drive how we manage our workforce moving forward and how nurses are going to be deciding on where and how they work. So I'm curious if you can put in the chat as we move along here. Can you, I would love to hear what learners, what are you hearing from your students, from your learners? What do they want out of their next job? What are you hearing? What has shifted over the past couple of years that has been different in what nurses are expecting as they graduate nursing school compared to what we want in the past? Yeah. So I'm seeing balance, work-life balance has really come in here. And that's it. Really, we're seeing a really big shift to part-time roles or per diem roles. Not wanting to stay at the bedside for long. If you look at nurse social media, the like nurse TikTok and that kind of stuff, most of the influencers talking about how fast can they get away from bedside care and into something different. And there's pros and cons to all of that. They don't want to be bullied. Exactly. We still have an eat your young kind of culture within nursing, and they don't want to necessarily have to work in med-surg as their first job. They're looking for the specialty that sings to them. While med-surg is a specialty and it is the core of most hospitals, people that want to go in the ER don't want to go to the med-surg for a couple hours or a couple years before they can earn the right to go to the ER. And I completely agree with that. I was an ER nurse as a new grad at UCLA, and if I had to work anywhere else, I probably would have left. So great. Thanks for all of that. So let's take a look at some numbers here. Right now, there's around an 8 to 15% vacancy rate, depending on the hospital system for RNs. It still takes about 70 days from offer to onboard a new clinician into a system. And we have about 10,000 people turning 65 each day for the next 16 years. And so we have this huge need for, not only there's a workforce shortage, but we have a huge care need that's growing. And so now is the time for nursing to step up and own that gap. But the workforce hasn't really changed yet, right? So we still value time and contribution. We have expectations that you do training and in-person related everything. But our nursing students are asking for nonlinear growth, non-traditional roles. They want to have flexibility where they can pick and choose shifts, not get locked into a certain number of days every single week. They want engagement, feedback, recognition, and collaboration. And they want time back, balance. They want to be challenged, and they want to be recognized for their contribution. And if that's not happening, that's where we have humongous turnover. I think it's still around 30 to 40% turnover rate for first year new grads without with a great transition to practice program. But that's not the way it has to be. And in fact, in our residency program right now, we have about a 95% retention rate after the first year because we engage them in coaching and lots of career development stuff. And so we don't have to continue the old way. We can still provide all of these values to the learners. And then healthcare employment really hasn't changed, right? We still have no flexibility. You're still scheduled 48 weeks at a time. You have these boring computer-based learnings that you click through as fast as possible. We still have these legacy systems. In fact, the time systems in many hospital systems are still based on DOS. We have the culture of you have to pay your dues before you're allowed to do anything fun, which is not going to be put up with our next generation of nurses. It's still very seniority based. Time served is valued over the competence of skill, and we're always understaffed and under budgeted. And so it's this is our environment that they're going into, and that this basically compromises every value of our next generation of nurses. And so no wonder they're asking, how fast can I get out of this system? We have to change this now, or we're not going to be able to retain our future nurses. And so how does this manifest for our new nurses? Well, they jump into travel nursing after that first year so they can go get that flexibility, get paid 3 times as much, and be able to kind of own their life. Or they're moving to per diem, where they're picking up several different jobs across platforms and across systems, and piecing together a full-time workload when they want to. They're switching specialties, and so we built fellowship programs for that to happen. They want to switch care settings. They move into becoming nurse practitioners or going to ambulatory care. In fact, we're actually putting new grads into the ambulatory care setting now, and it's a great experience for them. They love it. They want to go into non-clinical roles. They want to go into startups and entrepreneurship, and they're looking for non-nursing degrees like MBAs or other degrees, masters in innovation programs, in order to create the change that they wish to see in the world. So the future of the healthcare workforce is really going to be flexible. It's going to be skills matched to need, and the practitioner will remain in control. And so if we think about this as the paradigm, how can we prepare our workforce differently? Well, one of my favorite quotes is right here. I can't wait to graduate nursing school so I can create workarounds to poorly designed processes. And this is a quote I saw on a meme once a few years ago, but I think it still resonates pretty well. You know, nursing school teaches you the ideal, and then they get into the real world. And I think that's part of our gap. And I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to get people comfortable into care settings without having to actually physically be there all the time. And we'll talk about that in a second. So how is education changing, and what are the challenges we can do as educators? One, we're learning that interleaved learning is a better way to teach and to learn, based on the research and the book Make It Stick, which is different than Made to Stick, but Make It Stick is around the neuroscience of learning and creating really complex interwoven concepts. Like, instead of just saying, here's the kidney, here's what the kidney does, but also talking about acid base and fluid retention and all these other things associated with the kidney, helps you learn those complex concepts better than just blocking content like we've done in the past, where you do GI for a week and then you do cardio for a week and then you do skin for a week. And after each one of those weeks is over, you sort of never talk about it again. That learning is no longer seen as a great way to teach. We have technology-enabled education, right? So now we have VR, XR, AR. We have online pieces. We have, you can upload your syllabus to AI now, and it will read the entire syllabus and assign videos to you to watch in order to augment your learning. There's tons of research. You can basically go to nursing school for free on the internet right now. And there's access to really great world-class content. Faculty don't have to create lectures anymore. The content exists in the world. There are YouTube videos. There's amazing content from other providers. There's things like UbiSim and others, the publishers, who have these wonderful, amazing content. So faculty need to start shifting away from building PowerPoint decks and moving towards context instead of content. And that, I think, is a big shift for a lot of our faculty who want to, create the heart lecture again. But remember, the heart hasn't changed since the invention of humans. And so we don't need to all create our own heart lecture. There is probably on the internet a very awesome heart lecture by the world's leading heart anatomist. You don't have to do that anymore. So pull that into and start talking about then not the content of the heart, but how it relates to the population in which you're serving in your local area. Team-based learning is another awesome opportunity where we don't have to do passive learning anymore, and then really a truly integrated curriculum. And I think if we sort of leverage all of these pieces, then we can create a nursing school experience that prepares our graduates for practice much better. So this is our paradigm shifting moment and another AI picture. And so you can see here that we have Florence Nightingale running away from robots. And this is not the paradigm that we want. We want to see Florence Nightingale working with robots. And so, or technology. The AI makes robots look really good and humans look really bad. If you look at her right knuckle, you can see she has about 17 fingers. AI is never going to take your job. It's because it can't figure out how to make hands yet. All right, so where are we at? We're at this clash between academia and practice. It's two buffaloes running into each other, and we're right at the center of this. So let's take a quick look at education innovation and how we might be able to move forward. So the way we sort of evolved our nursing education lives has been sort of what we did with most of the technology adoption in the 1990s, which is saying we used to do this on paper. Now we can do this on a computer. We're just going to take the paper process and put it on a computer, and now do it on a computer instead of paper. But we sort of did that with education too. We took sort of, in-person lecture, in-person discussion boards, in-person delivery of content, and then just virtualized it and said, okay, well, instead of lecturing in person, I'm going to lecture on a video and I'm going to send it to them and they have to watch it at home. And then when they come into class, I'll lecture to them again. Or we have an online class discussion instead of an in-person discussion. We're going to take that paper Scantron test and then we're going to put it into an electronic test. We didn't really shift the way we taught. We just digitized it. And I think there's a real opportunity for us, and in the middle column here, to customize, connect, and coordinate and personalize education, similar to what we're doing with healthcare. And so we have tools like virtual reality in which you can put someone in a customized scenario and they can do it over and over and over again, so that then they can move into a simulated mannequin-based simulation and feel comfortable there and take the stress off the mannequin-based simulation. Once they've perfected that, now they can go into the clinical setting and be ready to deliver care with humans. And if we can create that ecosystem, then we can really have students have better experiences and be ready for the complex care environments in which they sit in. So VR for education is really one of the newest emerging technologies in simulation. So I started my career in mannequin-based simulation. I was the guy that pulled SimMan out of the closet and figured out how to program him as his nursing student and then taught all our faculty how to do that. Now we're moving into these virtual models. And what we find with our graduates, our new graduates in our program, is they have knowledge about nursing. They understand drugs and they understand the disease states and they can make decisions related to that. But they're really uncomfortable in the patient room, or they're really uncomfortable in the order of steps in order to make different things happen. And so there's an opportunity to use things like virtual reality in order to put them in situations so they can fail fast. They can practice and know where the oxygen tank is, or how to move a patient, or where to place something, or how to grab and pull up the medication and where to administer it. Like, those basic skills are foundational, and they're what's lacking in many of our graduates. Then it also enhances their decision making, right? They can run through a scenario, have a conversation with the patient in the environment, and feel like they're immersed in it. And it's a lot more realistic in many ways than what we can do with mannequin-based sim, because we can program a lot of different things in here, and you feel part of the environment. And so there's an opportunity here for us to do hands-on training. We're also using VR once they graduate, which I think is really important for you to know too. We're using virtual reality to orient our new grads to the operating room, so they can actually be in a live 3D filmed surgery and understand where to stand and sterility and a bunch of other things. And so they're getting this technology now. And what I would love to see moving forward, especially in our practice settings, is to move away from poster boards and annual education days and actually put on a set of goggles and put them in to practice those restraints and all the things that are going on. So I think there's a huge opportunity here for us. And ultimately, I want to challenge you. I'm going to do just a couple more slides here, and then I want to get into questions. So get those ready. But I want to challenge you. Right now, nursing schools are measured on their NCLEX pass rates. And I would say, as a practice leader with new grads, I would say I don't care about your NCLEX pass rates. Ultimately, that's table stakes. What I care about is how fast your graduates can adapt to the clinical setting and be ready and prepared and independent. And so, while NCLEX pass rates are good, I expect them. What I want to see is a prepared graduate. And so can we look at a time to onboard as a potential metric that we measure graduates from as well? How are they being prepared for specialties? Many schools still prepare for general sort of clinical settings, but our hard to fill roles are in level 4 NICUs and ICUs and ERs and ambulatory care and home health. So how do we prepare our students to jump into those specialties, not just the sort of med-surg education that we have now? And then certifications and competencies. What if students came out of undergrad education and were certified emergency room nurses? What if they could sit for that exam and pass it right away? Those are the type of things that would add a lot of value moving forward. And I know there's a lot to that. Again, these are provocations, but those are the type of opportunities we have to rethink how we educate. And I'll just give you one quick example that this has been done before. And so I was on the founding faculty of the Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, and and in the bullets here you can see all the things we challenged in medical education. No tenure, no up and out. It's a cadaverless VR-enabled anatomy lab. The 2+2 science for 2 years and then clinical for 2 years. They're in clinic on week 2 of medical school, and they're assigned to a clinic their entire career as a medical student with the same preceptor, with the same population of patients. And so they follow them into all of the care settings from the primary care perspective. There's no lecture hall in the building. We've done integrated assessment. So all courses have one assessment tied together. And we've really emphasized interprofessional education and wellness as a core of the curriculum. So we were able to challenge the medical education model, which I'll tell you is way more archaic than nursing school. We can do it with medicine. Nursing can definitely do it better. So I'm going to leave you now with a couple provocations, and I'd like to get into questions. So the first one, and these are things to think about, to take back to your schools, to challenge yourself on what you want, what you could do to change the way nurses are educated moving forward, or healthcare professionals are educated. One, how might nursing education enable more competent and confident nurse graduates in any care setting? So your graduate could go into the level 4 NICU, or they could go into home care or ambulatory clinics. How can you prepare those students to meet any care setting, not just the hospital-based generalist professions that we're sending them into? Next, how might virtual reality improve clinical decision-making and preparation? How could you enhance a lecture about the heart by putting on virtual reality goggles and sticking your head inside of a beating heart rendered from an MRI? That's possible now. So instead of reading about a ventricular septal defect, you can put your head through the hole of a real ventricular septal defect and see the pressure differences on either side of that hole. That's the way we can teach now, and we know that it prepares better. There's research out of Case Western that shows you can teach faster using plastinated models and virtual reality for anatomy than you can with cadavers. So VR can give us curriculum time back because it's more efficient learning. And then how might academia and practice more seamlessly collaborate to improve nurse transition to practice? So how can we partner together to create a curriculum that's seamless from graduation to transition to practice, so it's one continuous loop in which the student comes out more prepared and more connected to the world of nursing? And if we do all of those things, then we can move from Florence running away from change to embracing it and inviting it. So with that, I'll wrap up our content section and would love to answer some questions. So Debbie, what do we got in the chat?
All right. Well, we have a question. Nursing education, as you said, is as a blockbuster moment. And so the question is, what are the biggest risks of sticking with traditional methods, and how can educators overcome resistance to adopting innovative solutions like simulation and immersive learning?
Yeah, great question. I think the risk I think the risk is staying where we're at because it's not meeting the needs on the practice side. So I think our biggest risk is doing nothing. And that's why I call it a blockbuster moment. Blockbuster did not do anything wrong. They just chose not to do anything different. And then the world changed around them and they were irrelevant. I think the same goes for nursing schools. And the second part of that question, that was my whole dissertation. So I looked at the adoption of simulation in a nursing school and the leadership characteristics it took to do that innovation. And what I'll say is you got to find there's one critical role, and we called it the coordinator role. So someone who is an early adopter of virtual reality, who loves it so much they can't stop talking about it, and they take it around and they share it, and in a totally like excited, sort of benign way, just like, hey, have you seen this? Try this thing out. Put this headset on. Do this thing. That really was the catalyst for mannequin-based simulation. And then not to force people initially. If you follow the diffusion of innovation sort of process, the faculty need to be able to touch the innovation, try it out, test it, adapt it, break it, fail at it. You got to give them a chance to play around. So creating a safe space where it's not mandatory adoption, but for them to be able to sort of test it out and adapt it their own way. When we did the dissertation work, the critical care faculty jumped on simulation right away. They're like, we can do codes, we can do all this stuff that we don't see in the healthcare setting. But the maternal child faculty didn't want it that quickly. And so they didn't adopt it right away until they saw the other parts of the school using it and how impactful it was. Now they jumped on. So don't force people initially. Give them a chance to try it and enable, and you'll overcome it. And that's based on the evidence and the research around innovation.
Right. Yeah, I just want to emphasize, this education to practice gap that we keep talking about has been a documented issue for over 50 years in nursing. And we had Del Buono's seminal research that came out in 2001. And at that point, the numbers were 35% of our newly graduated RNs weren't ready for practice. And then we jumped to 2017, which was 16 years later, and that number dropped to 23%. Then we jumped 8 years to today's current situation, and that number has dropped to 9%. So, when you said if we don't do anything, it will be our demise. We have to become innovative and start to make a change. So, yep. Good point. How can you increase buy-in for new technology with older nurse educator staff?
Yeah, I think I don't see age as the issue, honestly. When we built the ASU Sim Center, some of our most senior faculty were the ones that championed the thing all the way through. So I wouldn't blame it on age. I would say, though, that you need to sort of challenge what's going on and give them resources. So what we ended up doing was creating training programs for those faculty. We actually created like an internal certification to be a simulationist before that was a thing. We provided technology support, so they didn't have to write the scenario. They didn't have to run the mannequin. They were able to just facilitate the learning, and we provided others to help them take their subject matter expertise and translate it into the virtual setting or into the mannequin-based setting. So I think it's really providing some resources there and using them for what they're really good at, which is their experience and their subject matter expertise, and take the burden of having to learn the technology off of them initially. Once they get into it and they want to kind of play around more and they get frustrated waiting for someone else to do it, they'll start picking it up. But I think it's really allowing for that resourcing and that sort of internal development to happen.
Yeah, good points. Another question, what are your thoughts about dedicated educational units?
I think they're great. When I was at Ohio State, we had a dedicated education unit. It was awesome. It provides that continuity of care similar to what we've or learning as similar to what we did with the med school as well, placing them in a clinic and allowing them to have sort of experience across a panel of patients. So I think that's it's a great model. And if you can create those partnerships with your academic and practice colleagues, that really, I think, is the way to go. What I want to get away from is us throwing people over the fence and just hoping that they land somewhere. Those partnerships, I think, are key, and the dedicated education units are one that has been shown to improve those resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Question came in. What do you think about the new AACN Essentials? Is it just more of the same, or are we looking at a paradigm shift?
Yeah, thanks for that, Susie. I appreciate that question. I think it's a little bit of the same. Honestly, I think there's opportunity to innovate. I tried to influence that a little bit. I was able to be a part of some of those foundations around innovation and things. I would like them to push a little harder. I do think competency education is great. That was sort of the bold move there. But I do think we need to incorporate a few other things. I was hoping that innovation would be in there, change leadership. EBP would be a little bit more pronounced there. And I do think we need to challenge the idea that everyone has to do every specialty in nursing school. And I think we have to start thinking about how do we specialize a little bit. Or we're going to miss the boat on what the market needs from our graduates.
Okay, good. Um, we're almost wrapping things up here time-wise. I do want to ask this virtual reality question. It seems it is helpful for the VR adoption in nursing schools if you have a tech expert assigned to them. So faculty there to provide the facilitator expert role and a tech sim person to help with technology. But what if you don't have that expert?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the vendors like UbiSim have that expertise, and so they can help support you. I think that's where we started when we started simulation with the mannequins. We didn't have simulation experts either. They sort of had to learn it themselves, but we leaned really heavily on the manufacturers to do the training and get us up to speed. So I would say that that's one. And it doesn't always have to be a formal role. You likely have faculty in other departments that may be interested in this, or students and other special programs that may want to help implement this type of technology. And so I would find those early adopters. When ASU started its Sim Center, what we did was we asked our senior nursing students to raise their hand if they wanted to do their senior project on implementation of simulation. And I raised my hand, and that's how I got involved in innovation. I had no idea what the mannequin was. So use your students and say, hey, anyone want to work on VR? We got a headset and some content. Go play around with it and figure it out. I think you'll have a lot of interest in that, and you'll have instant simulation technology expertise.
Yeah. Another question here. You're commended for having a great presentation, Dr. Dan.
Thanks.
So how do we go about implementing clinical judgment when we are talking large group of learners, trying to watch a scenario by casting it on a screen? How can we optimize that experience?
Yeah, it really comes down to facilitation, and there's some evidence in the simulation journals that watching a simulation can have just as much of an impact, if not more, on the learner as being in the simulation. So that we know that from mannequin-based simulation. And what's cool about VR is you're immersed in the head of the learner. So you're not just watching it; you're almost experiencing it as well. And so I think that there's a lot to that, but it does come down to facilitation. So you need to have someone in that room with that group who's being cast to, and asking questions, pausing the scenario in moments to say, what would you do here? What would you do differently? And you can really get them to start assessing their own thoughts and how they would approach things. I like the Socratic method. We've done a poster on that way in the past, but using the Socratic method to say help them down that decision tree. And I think that's really, really supportive. But the evidence says even watching sim can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding out there that some of these products or technologies are standalone kind of learning experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And following the NACSL standards, it does require debriefing and reflection and facilitation and discussion. And we have to educate ourselves and as educators and get ourselves up to speed so that we can optimize, student learning. Well, there were more questions, but we have run out of time. So I do thank you for posting your questions, and I really appreciate, Dan, you taking time today to discuss this critical discussion. And but before we go, I do want to quickly mention that throughout 2025, UbiSim is stepping up with a mission to bring attention and advocacy to the critical role of nurse educators. We'll be doing our best to empower nurse educators with solutions like VR simulation and foster support to address the challenges they face through webinars, shareable content, and a community. We hope you'll join us on April 2nd as we have another webinar entitled Joy as a Practice in Nursing Education. So we're going to wrap up our session today. Thank you for taking the time to join us. You will be receiving an email from the webinar, and there will be a link in that email that will provide you access to a transition to practice guide that might give you some ideas and some suggestions on how to actually implement what we talked about today. So thank you, everybody. We look forward to meeting you again in another webinar. And again, Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Welcome, everybody. I am so glad that you're joining us today. My name is Debbie Loop,